So the astrology of the week of 24 May 2021 to 30 May 2021, it's a week of uncertainty. This week has us stepping into this field of uncertainty, is what I may call it. We know things aren't going to go as planned. We know there will be blocks and delays. And I think the key theme this week is, what do you do knowing that? How do you respond when you know something is very strange, odd, uncertain, and maybe obstacle filled? And what do you do mentally to go into that space? That's what this week is about. And Mercury Retrograde will officially kick in, as well as the first eclipse of eclipse season, a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. So let's jump in here. Let's get into the chart. Let's get into the aspects this week. And I think that's, like I said, the most important thing that I'm taking into the week is this attitudinal preparation for stepping into shifting grounds, and what does that mean? I think that there's something here to be said about just preparing for that, knowing, hey, we're in an eclipse season. There's three things. We're in an eclipse season, which are always punctuated beginnings and endings that can be unpredictable and hard to, grab a hold of until you go through that experience or process. There's so many things in life, right? We don't know what it is until we've done it. Sex is one of them, you hear about it until you experience that. You don't have the sense of just how profound and powerful it can be. Two is so I was thinking the other experience here might be something like psychedelics or altered states. You hear people talk about them, but until you experience them, you don't have a full grasp of just how profound of a shift those things can be. And I think that's an important analogy, because we're dealing with the Jupiter-ruled lunar eclipse this week. Jupiter's big ideas, its big worldviews, and shifts in those worldviews, much like psychedelic experiences can bring. And by the way, I don't advocate those. I've had plenty in my youth. I am a clean and sober person these days, so it's not something I would ever advocate to someone. But if you do go into that, there's whole schools of healers that I would recommend you align yourself with if you're going to do that, a healing modality to really respect the power of those drugs. And, that's a side note. That's another example. There's many things, even meditation. Sometimes, I remember when I first started meditating, I would do it and have the experience. I'd get off the cushion, like sometimes even just like a short 1 or 2, sometimes 5-minute meditation, and my whole experience of myself was radically changed. And I couldn't know what that was like before going through the experience. So this is what eclipse season can be like. The second thing is that the mutability in the sky. When the moon is in that lunar eclipse, the sign Sagittarius for that lunar eclipse this week, you will only have in the transiting sky among traditional planets, Mars in Cancer, that's in a cardinal sign, and Saturn in Aquarius in a fixed sign. Everything else is in mutable signs. So the apportionment of the modalities amongst the transiting planets is heavy mutable energy, which in astrology, mutable signs are the signs of shifting sands and wearing two hats and two-facedness. They're called double body signs in ancient texts, because it's a double state, right? Two things happening at once. And then the third thing is that you have a Mercury retrograde starting this week, which is very often blocks, delays, and unpredictable things. I've got countless stories that on that retrograde station, where it can become most intense, often, wild things happening that resulted in, having to take a time out or waiting, things like computers crashing or delays in travel. So these are three astrological events this week that we know now, before we head into it, that demand us to wear life like a loose blanket, wear our attitudes loosely, expect the unexpected. And I think maybe the best word for this is a surrender to the divine, which eclipse season itself, even if it was in no Mercury retrograde, no mutable planets, eclipse season is often about that surrender to the divine in its own right. So that's what I'm thinking as a theme for this week. Let's just look at these aspects here. You have first up is on Wednesday about 1 where I am, that lunar eclipse. So it's not going to be visible here in Central Europe. That will happen on Wednesday. Then you have Mercury, this little kiss with Venus that happens on Saturday. And then Sunday you get the retrograde station and then the movement into retrogradation for Mercury. So it's a nice week, and it doesn't really, it's not like it's all segregated to the first couple of days. We have the eclipse on Wednesday, and then on Sunday Mercury retrograde. So this sense of uncertainty will be a continuation this week. And just thinking here a little bit about Mercury retrograde, it's retrogrades themselves are of the nature of inviting a pause when we think about them in their most auspicious delineation. It might be a pause, and you can say, all right, I'll take a pause. Pauses can be very useful for any number of things, but I think here of spiritual practice and inner work. I mean, saying, all right, I'm going to stop and I'm going to look at myself and analyze what's inside of me, and analyze my beliefs, analyze the language that I use about my reality. What words do I assign to everything around me, and how is there unconscious emotional attachments to what I envision around my space, and how is that limiting or unlimiting? These kinds of inventories can be highly useful to heal and to propel us into a more fruitful life after doing an inventory like that. This is the best way that a retrograde can operate, and you can often think about the theme of that planet being the theme of the review process that you'll go through. So what is Mercury again? It is business, it is thinking, it is writing, it is games, it is gambling. If you've been playing in these wild crypto markets, right? Maybe it's time to stop and review and pause. I think this is spiritual work, spiritual practice. We go inside and we examine ourselves. And that's why I was focused earlier on the words we attach to objects. I know I've been talking about that in the last few videos, but it's so fundamental to how reality can flow in its most positive way. What do words mean? What do we think they mean? And let's try to shake that up to kind of refresh our vision. And so we can have sort of this fresh vivacity as we approach every day, and a gratitude and appreciation for the gift of life. That's ultimately, I think, what, for me, inner work can bring. So maybe not ultimately, but a big part of it. So this Mercury retrograde, the other feature about it is it's in Gemini. So, let's say Mercury retrograde was in Pisces, that might be a completely different nature of what we're grappling with. Expansive, lack of understanding, spacey, poetic in a way that might be unintelligible. But here we have Mercury very strong in its home sign of Gemini, which I think brings this even more of an opportunity to do fruitful and constructive and productive reflection. I mean, you might even think about journaling. I talk about journaling a lot. Those that know me or if you've had readings with me, it's one of my favorite ways to get a grip on what should I do in this life. I'll have clients come to me, help me understand my life path. I think you can set the astrology aside. Of course, it's useful. We can always bring the astrology back in and explore what the chart might say about that. But, write it on a piece of paper. What should I do in my life? And then just sit and let kind of answers emerge from that well of the unconscious and write. And just write all your ideas down and see how things emerge from this collective energetic. I believe you will be inspired. That we're not here for no reason. This isn't just a sea of meaninglessness and nothingness. There's a purpose for your incarnation, and you can discover that through quietude and inner reflection. And that journaling process is a way to manifest it into a form that can be tangible. So I highly recommend that during this process. And you might even say, I'll just do a week of it, or just say the Mercury retrograde's 3 weeks. I'm going to try to every day wake up, what should I do in this life? And just write down what comes for 5 minutes even. And you may have a whole different model of how you're supposed to be in this realm after that 3-week period. So it's just one example of some structured approaches to a Mercury retrograde. Because it's in Gemini, my point here is that it might be even more supportive of this kind of deliberate writing work as opposed to other signs. The other thing I would say is that eclipse season I have here needs space to breathe. And I just think we have to stay open. It's just what I was talking about before, this idea of being open. Surrender is a great word, a spiritual word. It means that my sense of what should be or is or needs to happen, that has to all be put aside. And I just surrender over to something else, even the breath. I mean, you can feel it at this moment. I'm listening to some birds out here. I don't know if you can hear it on this audio. with these beautiful birds. And, they're just singing and in the flow of life, and there's the Sermon on the Mount. I think of that from the Christian New Testament. And Jesus in that Sermon on the Mount at one point says, look at the birds. Are they worried? Are they obsessing about things? No, they're just flitting about knowing that the nature is taking care of them. And I think that's a beautiful model for surrender, where we can just kind of, rest and fall back and relax into the fact that you are likely housed, or if you're not housed, you're probably in this very moment. And if you're listening to me on this video, you're probably in a space where you can listen. There's not bombs falling on you, like in some parts of the world there has been recently, sending divine energy for healing to that situation and those situations. But basically, if you've had a meal recently and if you're housed, you're protected. And I think there's a flow of life that we can surrender into that's even more important during eclipse season. Okay, getting off there a little bit on some maybe more esoteric ideas, but the notion here is that we're entering into this eclipse season. I think I'm going to try to stay as open as possible to let reality sort of form itself around me. These divine spaces to come in. So that moon is going to be pink red this week on Wednesday in places where it's visible. It's very strange. It's never like that, or rarely like that. Every few years you have these so-called blood moons. I like to think about maybe flushed lip moons. I mean, let's get something positive. I guess blood comes into those lips. You might think about it as like a impassioned moon, as opposed to like a bloody from some kind of violence. But okay, so this is a very important part of the week, and you see here it is Wednesday. You get the kiss from Venus, which I think will also sweeten the deal for Mercury's retrogradation. Not only is it in Gemini, the sign that Mercury rules by domicile, but Venus kisses it during that retrograde station, and it might really take some of the intensely difficult energy away from this station and provide maybe a pleasure, or just kind of, there's a pleasure in the unknown. There's a pleasure in uncertainty. It's kind of like, all right, God, it's up to you. Universe, it's up to you. I'm here. I'm going to stay present, but you can kind of laugh in the absurdity of things. Maybe that's what this Venus kissing Mercury on Saturday before the station turns retrograde on Sunday will indicate. So let's just move forward here. I want to look at some of the charts here. I already talked about the heavy mutable energy. I've got the eclipse chart up now. Let's take a look at just a little bit about the chart, see what we can see. So you see here we've got 7 of the traditional planets and the nodes. 7 of the points are in mutable signs, and 5 traditional planets are also in mutable signs if you exclude the nodes. That's a lot of mutability, like I talked about earlier. It's a season of change, and Lord knows we've needed one. I mean, this heavy fixed energy that we had the last month with all that pile up in fixed signs, 6 of the 7 traditional fixed signs for much of that period over the last month, that's shifting now, and we're kind of breaking out of it and into the summer months, into reopenings all over the world. There's the shifting rules. No one knows what's going to happen. A lot of uncertainty. How's life going to be this fall? I mean, all of this uncertain energy. Just embrace it. We need changes. We need change. That's how life moves forward. Think about a baby. He's born. It's always changing. It's growing and shifting. Hair grows. Teeth fall out. It's a constant sea of change is what life really is. And these mutable periods are an extra dose of that. And so I was in a reading this week, and I was talking to my client, and I was thinking about, we can look as astrologers as like, okay, this is going to be intense. This is going to be intense. It's just a non-stop flow of these intense activations in our charts through eclipses and perfections and all kinds of timing techniques. It never ends. And it wouldn't be life if it ended. This is what life is. It's a dynamic, intense, uncertain brilliance. It's a brilliant thing. That's why staying in the moment, I think, is the best way to do it. We breathe, we stay aware to really enjoy this profound opportunity to be in life and experience the consciousness of this ever-flowing situation we've incarnated in. I hear these children playing. Love that, because think about when you're a kid, it's constantly changing and flowing, and life, it's just the newness of a child. Mercury does signify children, and Mercury plays a special role here during this eclipse season because it is in Gemini with the sun, and it'll be retrograding. So in terms of rulership, the planet Jupiter rules that moon by term, Egyptian term, and by domicile, because the moon is in Sagittarius. So this is quite auspicious for me, and Jupiter is receiving the moon strong in Pisces. So Jupiter's really overseeing this eclipse, this abundant Jupiter in Pisces, and I do think it does provide a relief here in a way, and an opportunity to kind of nestle us and protect us during this eclipse moment. The other thing is that Jupiter itself, like I said, is in its own sign, Pisces, so it rules itself by domicile, but Jupiter is ruled by that long Egyptian term in the first part of Pisces that Venus rules. So the ruler of the eclipse is ruled by itself a benefic and ruled by the other benefic, Venus. There's a lot of benefic energy, and then of course Venus sees the moon across the way from Pisces being with the sun. So you have both of the benefic planets making these dynamic aspects to this eclipse moon. And you have Saturn supporting by trine. I talked a lot about that in the last few videos. This kind of stable structure of our elders maybe can contain us in this heavy mutable period. The trine and the sextile are quite supportive. And then Mars is segregated away. It's out here doing in Cancer, maybe in the emotional body, doing its thing there in Cancer, not aspecting anything. It doesn't make an aspect to Saturn or those 4 planets in Gemini, Sagittarius. It does make a trine to Jupiter, so it's getting that support from Jupiter. So there's a lot to like here. I have on my slide protected moment with these benefics aspecting. You know, remember, eclipses are movers forward of reality. That's how I like to think about it. We just are in our routines, you know, going about, and routinized life is a beautiful thing too. It can contain productivity, but if we get routinized on one path, sometimes the gods and the life force and the powers that be have to come shake us and move us back on to the fate that we are here to accomplish, or the fate that we're here to embrace. And that's what eclipses do. They move us ahead, endings, beginnings, intensities. And when they're operating benefically, like in this case with so much interaction with the benefic planets, I think we can think about this surrender I mentioned earlier. We can surrender into the idea that maybe there's forces of goodness working to help you along in your life. And if something ends, maybe it should be ending right now. Maybe you need to have something taken away, or I do, because I need to be placed back into the flow that I'm here to enjoy, you know, and to give, and the things I'm here to make, you know. And again, Gemini, Sagittarius, remember, ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is truth, big picture, big ideas, gratitude, hope, generosity. I think about it, sometimes it gets associated with religion. And what is religion? But it's a whole cosmology and a worldview. Religion explains why we're here. That's one way to define religion. Religion is an explanation of why we are here, what it means to be human. You know, it's speaking to our ontology. And that is what I think is in target here with these eclipses, upgrades to your kind of ontological understanding, your sense of who you are and what it means to be you and why you're here. This is what and surrendering into upgrades with that. I mean, I might not know what's going to be delivered, but Jupiter being so strong in Pisces and ruling this eclipse, I think we'll get upgrades here, possibly. So I always like to stay optimistic. You know, there's a humility that's required, I think, when we're expecting something good to happen, because, you know, sometimes, and I was tweeting about this last week, you know, maybe this Jupiter in Pisces, the strength Jupiter's just received in Pisces, is about digesting difficult truth. We saw that heavy difficulty in the reality just as Jupiter entered Pisces. There was some crashes in markets, there was the wars and the genocides that were happening. Those were very, very difficult to be with and witness. But see, certain truth requires facing difficulty and experiencing that. And I think when Jupiter left its co-presence with Saturn, it gave Saturn a lot of power to kind of limit and restrict. You know, Jupiter was there mollifying and softening Saturn up. Now Jupiter's gone. So we're, I think, forced to look into some deeper truths about reality with this Jupiter in Pisces, but we wouldn't understand those truths without experiencing the difficulty. So it's been a gift, is one way to look at it. And maybe Jupiter, once it gets stronger next year for those 5 months and is moving very fast through Pisces, I think that the promises and the seeds that have been planted recently maybe can come to their full flowering then. Okay, so let's move on. This next slide here, I want to talk about the fixed stars operating that are conjoined this lunar eclipse. Very important. always symbolically, I find these fixed stars add a flavor. And this is one of the most profound things in my practice over the last few years. Really the last, I'd say 2 years, when I'm sort of closely paying attention to syzygies and those fixed star energetics that merge with the syzygies. I mean, it's so uncanny how they symbolically infuse the moment, and then that manifests in the reality. So let's go here. Marfic. This is a fixed star in the constellation Ophiuchus, in the elbow of Ophiuchus, who's holding the snake. And the idea here with Ophiuchus is that he's a healer, a great healer, but there's this magical property to Ophiuchus Asclepius, where he basically was able to be impervious to poisons and use those poisons in a way, as a result of his protection from their impact, their negative impact, he could sort of deploy poison for healing. It's this idea that those that can heal are on this edge of life and death, and they've sort of gone over that threshold and come back and are sort of walking that edge. I mean, that's what healers do. They go to people that are dying and try to resurrect or bring them back. So there's this kind of knife's edge idea here. And we're right on the elbow of Ophiuchus. You can see here on this slide, the second slide here, Ophiuchus and Serpens. I've got this from the constellationofwords.com website. They've done a design upgrade, by the way, getting used to it. But this is my favorite site for fixed stars. It's got so much information and many of the stars here. You can see Marfic is right on the elbow where that snake is coiling. It's the elbow where the snake is coiling around that elbow. Now both arms are holding the snake, but this might be the area, if the snake was to strike, this is the arm closest to the head of the snake. So it's maybe the area that's most protected in a way. And, I think about this theme that if we're having a lunar eclipse and it's highlighting this energy, the notion here is that maybe we're not harmed. Maybe the protection, the magical protection we have, something about our current understanding of how we're protected in this moment from the poisons around us needs to be shifted, needs to be altered, and the second thing is this fixed star Jaba, which is in the forehead of the Scorpion, the Scorpio constellation. This is a constellation that's about arms and weapons. The Scorpio has the tail, and then it's like Mars, which is again a planet of weapons and war. And so there's in both of these fixed stars, there's a connection to dangerous things that can kill, poison and weapons. And so what could this be saying? And actually, I remember that last eclipse season was the time when the inoculations were launched in the UK, and there was this whole discussion about we have a solar eclipse in Sagittarius when these treatments have been launched. It's a little bit iffy and dicey, maybe. Different astrologers had different opinions, but I think this is the same theme. We've had this kind of medicalization of reality that's descended upon us in the last 2 years. And so, to get outside of controversial debates, I just want to raise it up to this larger theme of what are you doing with the kind of poisons around you, or that may be threatening you, or the threats to your health, and what upgrades or kind of new attitudes can we bring in? It's funny because this week, actually, I think it's part of my eclipse story, I just was like, all right, I've gone back to some of the turmeric I take in. I've always taken it in pretty consistently, but I'm just drinking tons of that recently. I just felt the need to do it. So there's some things that have been kind of coming back for me, and some reprioritizations. My outward conditions have allowed that refocus on some of the things I really like to do for my health. But this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about. I'm trying to stay open too. What else is out there? What else can I take on? What ideas of mine are not serving me? That's the Sagittarius. So the other thing I would say is that, Mars in Cancer here is, I have here the body and its toil. And I think that we're opening back up, right, as a society. Is your body fit for function? That's what the moon is. It's the physical body. And I was talking to some people this week, it's like spending this time in quarantine, the bodies have changed because the behavior's changed. And one friend of mine was having trouble with he's got some issues with his legs, but basically he's having to kind of learn to walk again, and some of the mobility had been transformed from being in the quarantine, or whatever you want to refer to that as, the segregation, or he made a choice to stay at home. he said. But the point is, I mean, I know people have had diet shifts, or the lack of movement has created body changes. And so I'm thinking about now, as we get back in with Mars being movement, how can we kind of reorient ourselves in what may be an unfamiliar space of being able to go out to the beach or go out and play in the park. And how does that feel in our bodies after what we've just gone through? That could be a theme. Remember, Mercury in Gemini is tricksterism, and that Mercury is there during this eclipse. Maybe there is things that we have to be wary of, wary of, ideas about health that we need to maybe question or kind of not take on. And I think that's always useful during eclipse season, is like delay. No, thank you, I'll look at that or research that or stay with that. I'm going to make decisions later. Wait till after eclipse season to maybe move forward with full thrust on an idea or an action. And these are, again, new thresholds around health. Eclipses are thresholds. We walk through them and life is irrevocably different. There's no turning back after that point. And I think it's a health-oriented and an idea-oriented eclipse season. So look for new thresholds, new things you can embrace to shift and change and heal your body, heal your mind even. Remember, Mercury is words and Gemini is attitudes. Sagittarius is these bigger attitudes, and Mercury is the specific language games. So maybe we can get some healing with even how we talk about ourselves. I mean, self-talk, it's a whole separate issue, but can be the most profound thing for health. It's like, I love you, I care for you. I mean, these are constant themes. For me, I try to always have this loving self-talk to myself, and I've been doing that for a few years. It's so much easier now. It's almost a constant positive stream in my mind for how I talk about myself. Now, there's times when, like, if there's a difficult moment where sometimes that can turn, but the most important thing with self-talk is the interruption. When the talk goes bad, is trying to interrupt and then replace with other positive thoughts, with the truth, because you are a child of God, you are a loved person, you are beautiful and deserve all the love in the world. That's the truth. But we have to replace when we have images counter to that. So, okay, let me keep pushing through here. It's easy for me just to keep talking, but let me keep pushing through here. I don't want this video to go too long. This star Jabba is in the face of that Scorpion, and I was just thinking here, like I said before, the vision is eclipsed. And remember, the Scorpion can strike, but it's seeing things and it strikes. I'm thinking here that maybe we can wait to strike. This is not the time to strike because of what we're seeing might be blocked through this eclipse moment. So holding off, sometimes we can realize that threats are boogeymen. Threats are just a phantom. Often they're produced in the mind. We invent them and we puff them up with our beliefs and our words and like I said, going back to that self-talk, we puff up non-truths. And then we start fighting things that aren't even real, and that energy gets wasted. I think this really does fit with the theme. I love this idea of waiting to strike, not trusting what we see as the enemy. It fits with that Mercury Retrograde review theme I mentioned earlier in the talk. So, fear is a boogeyman. Enemies are often boogeymen. They're just fantasy. The true enemy, I believe, is the thoughts, and it's the images and beliefs. That's where the realm, and I won't even say enemy, but that's where the healing can take place, purifying that and getting it set properly, getting it set and more aligned with truth, of love and of wisdom. So, okay, let me move through here, moving kind of quickly here. This is now the part every week I do, what's the moon, checking in with the moon. We've got this lunar gauntlet this week is what I've called it. This part of the zodiac always, independent of where the planets are, can be rough for the moon. Scorpio and Capricorn are the two roughest spots for the moon. And just because that's where it has debility, essential debility. But usually we think about Sagittarius being a place where the moon gets that great maybe relief. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Jupiter can be maybe an easier energy combined with the moon. We can kind of outwards expression of hope and moving the body to serve that, or nurturing for that. But this is where the lunar eclipse happens. There's the children playing. God, it's so cool to have that as a background to my life. I love it. So you have the moon in Scorpio challenged in its fall. The moon then gets eclipsed in Sagittarius. Then the moon comes into Capricorn, ruled by Saturn and in its exile there. And then the moon comes into Aquarius at the end of the week with Saturn. So this is not the easiest week for the moon. And I think about this way, when the road looks tough, this is what I have here. What's the response? And I remember in my life, there's been times like, I was thinking like a long work shift. You know, I used to work with my body a lot. I was in restaurants at times, working, you know, like if I was hungover or just been out destroying my body when I was a partier and a drug and alcohol-addled, you know, youth, I would just show up to work, maybe a few hours of sleep, and then it's like, all right, I got 8 hours of physical labor ahead. How did I respond in that moment? I had to just, all right, time to get busy and work. And those shifts would go by quickly as soon as I aligned my mind around something that was going to be a physically difficult and demanding period. And so there's a sense of not fighting difficulty and saying, all right, let's do it. I'm strong and I'm going to fight. I'm going to not fight the difficulty in the sense of trying to avoid it, but I'm going to go move through a challenge. The only way out is through. One of my favorite sayings. It's beautiful in astrology. The only way out of a transit is through it. There's nothing. We don't control those planets. I'm not moving them around. They are moving, and we have to move through life with these planets. And like this lunar transit, the only way to get to another moon in Cancer transit is, or a moon in Taurus transit, is to go through this in order, the moon as it moves through the zodiac. And this applies to every planetary transit. There's no avoiding it. So why not try to just move into it and accept it and then take it on? Because it's going to ask you something. This eclipse season, this Mercury retrograde, is asking you to do something. Life is constantly interfacing with us. So, you know, what does life want from you right now? And accept it. Okay, I accept. I'm going to do that. I'll move through that. It's a nice attitude. Even, or a travel delay, there's times when it's like, all right, I have to sit here. The border guards are going to take my passport. Who knows what they're going to say to me? All right, they want to interview me. All right, all I can do is just tell them the responses. And, you know, so there's a sense of surrender. And this is where I was going back to this idea of giving in, giving yourself over to the process, but surrender as a spiritual concept. You know, there's other forces, in this case, the planets in this lunar transit, and they're operating. We can't control them. We have to surrender over, do our best every moment to just bring this kind of loving, hopeful energy. So, okay, that is the weekly astrology. Really happy to be here, happy to be doing it. Let's move into the tarot reading. Let's add some symbols, see what these cards want to show us, what they want to add, what flavors they want to add to these delineations. And let me see here. Let me pull the first card. So this is going to be, I don't know if I have anything to say maybe before it. You know, I think the cartomancy and the sortilege, again, I always just say it's such a profound way to interface with this unknown and letting something else come through. I mean, I have a random number generator and I don't know what, it's random. It's an algorithm. So it's like, this is again a sense of this uncertainty that I talked about at the beginning of the talk. When we do a reading, a cartomancy or a sortilege reading, it's the same energy. I've got to surrender over to the cards and say, all right, I'm bringing you my concern, which is this week of astrology. That's the topic of the reading. What do you want me to learn? What should I look at? And then embracing that uncertainty, but with a spiritualism. That's why I like to breathe when I press the cards, because it's me aligning with that divine spirit, and then I can say, okay, thank you. And we get the first card. This is going to be, let's see here, let me get it up. We've got the wonderful, the Queen of Clubs, the Fire Queen. And this does correspond to Leo, this Fire Queen. There's a whole thing I could say here about this particular correspondence system and the balance between so-called masculine and so-called feminine. And there's this kind of blending of those energetics. The tarot is one of the most kind of forward-thinking systems in terms of gender, because there's inversions, there is dual assignments, and there is mixed genderism. So there's these blends and flows within the symbolism of the tarot. And the ancient medieval symbolism knew these kind of that the gender models are definitely at some level are kind of break down. And so I love that about the tarot. I think it's kind of before its time with that. So, okay, we've got here the first card, the Fire Queen Leo. What's the sun doing? Well, this week the sun will be part of this syzygy, right? A syzygy is 3 bodies, and when they line up, that's the definition astronomically. So when we use the moon and the sun and the earth, that's what a syzygy is. And that's when you have new moons and full moons. It's a syzygy with those 3 bodies lining up. So the sun plays a key role. There's no lunar eclipse without the sun. And I think, again, you can think about this idea of this polarity, and we don't have to genderize it. We can just say light, dark, right? Sect, if we want to use sect, day, night. It's a polarity. And when those 2 opposite parts of the poles align, that's when we get these moments where fate, it kind of shocks us. It's almost like an electric glitch that then things come through. I saw someone on Twitter saying eclipses are a glitch. I wish I could cite that tweet, but someone was saying that. I think it was Saltwater Stars. That Twitter was saying, their Twitter was eclipses are glitches. I kind of like this idea because of the idea of, like, I saw this film, The Glitch in the Matrix, a new documentary that just came out about reality being a simulation, or the Matrix film. He's got something where there's a glitch, and he goes, it's deja vu, and there's a little cat that reappears twice, and that means that something was changed from outside the Matrix. And you can think about these eclipses being like that. They're the way that we get these upgrades, like a software upgrade to respond to the events since last eclipse. The devs have to send these updates, and that's what eclipses are, the updates. I was talking about this earlier, about the path and getting knocked back onto the right path. So I think here, wow, how did I even get off on this idea? With Leo here being ruled by the sun, and the sun being a key part of that binary, it's moon-sun binary, that has to align perfectly to have an eclipse. That's where I was going with this. The other thing you could think about, this is the recent past, maybe the difficult events of the fixed pileup we've all gone through, because Leo's a fixed sign. We had that moon in Leo when all of the explosive, war crimes of the last couple of weeks happened. So, this might be kind of healing, or trying to get, bring that pain of our fixed part of our charts, that intensity of the fixed part of our charts, bring it into this moment. All right, I'm going to push on and we just entered Gemini season, so it does bring focus back to mutability. I will say that the ruler of Leo is the sun, and the sun is a fixed energy. It moves consistently over the ecliptic and in that straight line, whereas other planets are going up below and above the ecliptic. They're more like a sine wave. So the sun kind of embodies fixity. I mean, it shines in a constancy. That's why we have life. If the sun stopped shining ever, we would die. It would die. Life would end. So the sun is very fixed by its nature, but in now a mutable sign, Gemini. So I think this also underscores the shifting out of fixed focus into mutable focus energy, from Taurus, where the sun was last week, and now into Gemini. Okay, let me get the second card. It's nonstop with esotericism and symbology. I mean, we could do so many videos, just a nonstop stream of talking about this stuff. So let me try to collapse down here, get the last card. Let's see what this card wants. All right, well, okay, so we've got here, this will be, where is it? Right here. Okay, 14. 14 was the number in my generator that came up for both the cards. That's why I was saying, wow. That number 14, it corresponds to different cards, and they're 2 different decks. So, but just to see numerologically that same number appearing is quite interesting. 14, there's a lot that can be said about 14. But I'm going to 14. Let me come back here. So death is the second card for the future, and death, I love it. And I'm just going to say just quickly why I like this for the theme of this talk was so this corresponds to the fixed sign Scorpio. So it's again pointing us to this fixed energetic, but we move from fixed to mutable. This theme I was just mentioning, we've gone from Taurus now into Gemini. We've gone from Jupiter being in Aquarius, the fixed sign, now into Pisces. So everything I talked about earlier about this the necessity of a mutable period and of change, I think that's what this is pointing to. And the thing about the death card is that when you look closely at it, you can see here there's plants growing. So it's got its scathe and it's got like human hands. It's almost like the humans are fertilizing, these dead bodies are fertilizing the earth, and new life is coming up from it. So it's very much a sense of the shifting nature of form, and how when some things die, new things they're just necessarily born. So what's being born for you? What's dying and what's being born? Maybe we can end on this contemplation during this eclipse season. Look for that. Okay, that is the weekly astrology. That's the tarot reading. Very happy to be here. Thank you for watching. As always, you can book or schedule readings with me, sjanderson144.com. Click here to schedule a reading right at the top. I really look forward to reading with you. And it's because it's a shared process where we come into your life and we try, and I can bring what I can bring to look at what you're going through. And yeah, as always, too, have a wonderful and lovely week. Talk to you very soon. Take care.